At my mother's 60th birthday celebration, she looked directly at me and delivered words that cut like a blade through my heart. "Kylie, you'll never be half the woman your sister Victoria is. She's the one who holds this family together, the one we can always count on." I stood up, my hands trembling with years of suppressed emotion, and replied with a voice steadier than I felt. "If that's really how you feel, then from now on, let Victoria handle all the family expenses. I'm done sending money." The elegant dining room fell silent. Crystal glasses stopped mid-air, conversation ceased, and all eyes turned to me. My parents stared in shock, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What money?" my father asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've never received a penny from you, Kylie. Victoria is the one who's been supporting us all these years." I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers, opened my banking app, and the truth I revealed that night would shatter everything my family thought they knew about their perfect daughter and their forgotten one. Before we dive into today's storytelling session, tell us where you are watching from and add like and subscribe to this section so we can continue bringing you these compelling narratives. My name is Kylie Lipa and I'm 28 years old. I was born and raised in Salem, Oregon, a mid-sized city known for its cherry blossoms in spring and the Willamette River that winds through downtown like a silver ribbon. Salem has that small city charm where neighbors know each other's business, where high school reunions matter, and where family reputations can follow you for generations. But my childhood in this picturesque setting was anything but picture-perfect. From my earliest memories, I lived in the shadow of my older sister Victoria, who was everything I could never seem to be. Victoria was 3 years older, blessed with natural charisma, stunning looks, and an ability to command attention the moment she entered any room. She had golden blonde hair that caught sunlight like spun silk, bright blue eyes that sparkled with mischief, and a laugh that made everyone around her feel like they were part of something special. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one with mousy brown hair, glasses that never seemed to sit right on my nose, and a tendency to disappear into the background of family gatherings. My father, Robert Lipa, worked as a regional sales manager for a paper manufacturing company, spending most of his time on the road visiting clients across the Pacific Northwest. When he was home, his attention naturally gravitated toward Victoria, who could regale him with animated stories about her cheerleading squad, her latest boyfriend, or her plans to become a fashion model. My mother, Susan Lipa, was a part-time real estate agent who never missed an opportunity to brag about Victoria's accomplishments to anyone who would listen. "My Victoria is going to be famous someday," she'd tell the cashier at the grocery store, her voice full of pride and certainty. I was different from Victoria in every way that seemed to matter to my parents. Where she was outgoing and social, I was introverted and studious. Where she excelled at cheerleading and school politics, I found solace in books, art, and later, in learning about business and finance. I spent hours in my room reading everything from classic literature to business magazines I'd sneak from my father's briefcase. I was fascinated by numbers, by how companies worked, by the stories behind successful entrepreneurs who built empires from nothing. But to my parents, these interests were just Kylie being weird again. They couldn't understand why I'd rather read about Warren Buffett's investment strategies than watch Victoria's cheerleading competitions. They didn't see value in my straight-A report cards because Victoria's B average came with popularity and social success. "Grades are fine," my mother would say dismissively, "but Victoria has what really matters. She knows how to work with people." The comparisons started early and never stopped. Every family dinner became an opportunity for my parents to highlight Victoria's achievements while treating mine as afterthoughts. When Victoria made the varsity cheerleading squad as a sophomore, there was a celebration dinner at our favorite steakhouse. When I won the state academic decathlon in business and economics, my mother mentioned it briefly before switching the conversation to Victoria's upcoming homecoming date. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became my mother's favorite refrain. Victoria makes friends so easily. She's involved in school activities. She's going to be successful because she understands people. The implication was always clear. I didn't understand people, I wasn't social enough, I wasn't enough, period. The wound deepened during family gatherings. Aunts, uncles, and family friends would fawn over Victoria, asking about her modeling aspirations and her busy social calendar. I would sit at the kids' table long past the age when I should have graduated to adult conversations, invisible and forgotten. When relatives did acknowledge me, it was usually with well-meaning but painful comments like, "Oh, Kylie's the smart one," said in the same tone they might use to describe the family's reliable but unremarkable pet. One Christmas morning when I was 14 stands out in my memory like a scar that never quite healed. Victoria had asked for and received a professional camera for her modeling portfolio, complete with lighting equipment and editing software. The family gathered around as she opened gift after gift, each one more expensive than the last. I had asked for books on entrepreneurship and a small investment in a business course I'd found online. Instead, I received generic gifts, a sweater that was 2 sizes too big, a gift card to a store I never shopped at, and a book about making friends and influencing people that felt more like a criticism than a gift. "Maybe this will help you learn to be more social," my mother said as I unwrapped the book, her smile well-intentioned but devastating. I nodded and smiled as I always did, but inside I was crumbling. I retreated to my room that afternoon and cried into my pillow, wondering what was wrong with me that my own parents couldn't see my worth. High school should have been my chance to shine in my own way, but Victoria's shadow only grew longer and darker. Salem High School felt like Victoria's kingdom, where she reigned as homecoming queen, prom queen, and the most popular girl in her class. Teachers still remembered her fondly when I arrived 3 years later, and I constantly heard, "Oh, you're Victoria Lipa's sister." She was such a delight to have in class. I threw myself into academics and extracurricular activities that aligned with my interests. I joined the debate team, the business club, and started a small tutoring service that actually earned me decent money. I maintained a 4.0 GPA and scored in the 99th percentile on my SATs. But none of this seemed to matter to my parents, who were busy attending Victoria's cheerleading competitions and modeling portfolio shoots. The contrast became even more stark when Victoria graduated and announced she was moving to Los Angeles to pursue modeling and acting. The family rallied around her dream with unwavering support. My parents helped her find an apartment, co-signed her lease, and sent her monthly allowances to cover her expenses while she got established in the entertainment industry. The entire extended family treated her departure like she was going off to save the world, showering her with farewell parties and promises to support her journey. When I announced that I'd been accepted to the University of Oregon's Business School with a partial academic scholarship, the response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," my mother said absently, then immediately shifted the conversation to Victoria's latest headshots and a callback she'd received for a commercial audition. College became my escape and my salvation. At the University of Oregon in Eugene, I was finally free from constant comparisons to Victoria. I could be Kylie Lipa, business student and future entrepreneur, not just Victoria's little sister. I threw myself into my studies with passion, majoring in business administration with a focus on finance and marketing. I lived frugally, stretching my partial scholarship and part-time job earnings to cover tuition, books, and living expenses. While my classmates went out to parties and bars, I was usually in the library or working at the campus bookstore to make ends meet. I didn't mind the sacrifice, I had goals, and I was determined to achieve them without asking my parents for help. I'd seen how they supported Victoria's dreams unconditionally, and I knew that support wouldn't extend to me in the same way. During my sophomore year, I started a small business buying and reselling textbooks online. What began as a way to afford my own books quickly grew into a profitable venture that taught me valuable lessons about inventory management, customer service, and online marketing. By my junior year, I was earning more than many of my classmates made at their part-time jobs, and I was investing the profits in stocks and mutual funds. Meanwhile, Victoria's LA adventure was becoming increasingly expensive for my parents. Her modeling career wasn't taking off as quickly as she'd hoped, and she frequently called home asking for money to cover rent, headshots, acting classes, and networking opportunities that always seemed to involve expensive dinners and events. My parents never hesitated to send whatever she asked for, often going into debt to support her dreams. Victoria is so close to her big break, my mother would tell anyone who'd listen. She just needs a little more time and support. They treated her financial dependence as temporary, an investment in her inevitable success. They spoke of her struggles with sympathy and admiration for her perseverance. When I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration and immediately landed a job with a prestigious consulting firm in Portland, the family's reaction was characteristically muted. There was no graduation party, no celebration dinner, just a brief congratulations, before the conversation turned to Victoria's latest audition or modeling gig. Portland became my new home and the place where I finally began to build the life I'd always dreamed of. The consulting firm, McKinsey & Associates, specialized in helping small and medium-sized businesses optimize their operations and increase profitability. I loved the work, analyzing financial data, identifying inefficiencies, developing strategies for growth. I was good at it too, quickly earning recognition from clients and colleagues for my thorough analysis and creative solutions. My starting salary was modest but comfortable, allowing me to rent a small apartment in the Pearl District and begin paying off my student loans ahead of schedule. I lived simply but contentedly, cooking at home, reading business books in my spare time, and slowly building a portfolio of investments with my savings. As the months passed, I received updates about my family's financial situation through stilted phone calls with my mother. My father's sales territory had been reduced due to company downsizing, significantly impacting his commission-based income. My mother's real estate business was struggling in a tough market, and she'd been forced to reduce her hours to care for my aging grandfather, who'd moved in with them after a stroke. Most concerning was the mounting debt they'd accumulated supporting Victoria's career in Los Angeles. Credit card balances, a second mortgage on their home, and personal loans to friends and family members painted a picture of a family in serious financial distress. Yet they continued sending money to Victoria monthly, treating her support as a non-negotiable expense even as they struggled to pay their own bills. "We believe in Victoria's dreams," my mother explained during one particularly difficult conversation. "Success in Hollywood takes time and we're not going to give up on her now." The implication was clear. Victoria's dreams were worth any sacrifice, while my steady career and financial stability were taken for granted. It was during this time that I made a decision that would define the next several years of my life. Despite feeling overlooked and undervalued by my family, I couldn't stand by and watch my parents struggle financially. I began sending money home each month, initially $2,000, then increasing to $2,500 as their situation became more desperate. The logistics were complicated because my parents, particularly my mother, were not comfortable with online banking or digital transfers. They preferred cash transactions and were suspicious of anything that seemed too technological. Victoria, who still lived part-time between Los Angeles and Salem, offered to help facilitate the transfers. "Just send the money to my account," she suggested during a family phone call. "I come home every few weeks anyway, and I can give Mom and Dad cash directly. It's easier than trying to teach them how to use banking apps." It seemed like a logical solution, and I trusted my sister despite our complicated relationship. Every month, I dutifully transferred money to Victoria's account with detailed notes explaining the purpose. For Mom and Dad utilities, for Mom and Dad groceries and expenses, for Mom and Dad medical bills. I never questioned whether the money was reaching its intended recipients because I assumed Victoria, despite her self-centeredness, wouldn't betray the family's trust in such a fundamental way. Meanwhile, my career in Portland continued to flourish. I was promoted to senior consultant within 18 months, earning recognition for my work with a chain of local restaurants that I helped turn from near bankruptcy to profitability. My success led to speaking opportunities at business conferences and invitations to write articles for trade publications. I was building the life I'd always wanted: professionally successful, financially stable, and intellectually fulfilled. But the shadow of my family's favoritism toward Victoria still followed me. During our monthly phone calls, my mother would spend most of the conversation updating me on Victoria's latest auditions, her new headshots, or her expanding network in the entertainment industry. Victoria is so close to landing a series regular role, my mother would gush. Her agent says she's perfect for this new show about young professionals in New York. She just needs to book this one job and everything will change. These conversations always ended with subtle or not-so-subtle hints about Victoria's continued financial needs and my parents' sacrifices to support her. My own achievements were mentioned briefly, if at all. When I told my mother about my promotion and salary increase, she responded with a distracted, "That's nice, honey," before launching into a detailed account of Victoria's callback for a national commercial. The pattern continued for nearly 2 years. I sent money faithfully each month, lived modestly despite my increasing income, and watched from afar as my family's financial situation seemed to stabilize. My parents stopped mentioning immediate crises like overdue utility bills or medical expenses they couldn't afford, which I took as evidence that my support was making a difference. Victoria's social media presence, meanwhile, became increasingly lavish. Her Instagram account featured photos from expensive restaurants, designer shopping trips, luxury spa days, and weekend getaways to places like Napa Valley and Las Vegas. She posed next to expensive cars and wore jewelry and clothing that seemed far beyond what a struggling actress and model should be able to afford. When I occasionally asked about her apparent prosperity during family calls, my parents explained it away as the result of her networking and investment in her career. They spoke of generous friends in the industry who invited her to events, agencies that provided clothing for portfolio shoots, and the importance of maintaining a certain image in Hollywood. "You have to spend money to make money," my father explained. "Victoria understands that you can't succeed in entertainment without investing in your image and relationships." His tone implied that I, with my practical approach to money and conservative lifestyle, wouldn't understand the complexities of Victoria's industry. I accepted these explanations because I wanted to believe them, and because questioning Victoria's finances would have required confronting uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics. It was easier to focus on my own life and career, to trust that my monthly contributions were helping my parents, and to assume that Victoria's apparent success was legitimate. But doubt began to creep in during my 3rd year in Portland. I'd been promoted again, this time to principal consultant with a substantial salary increase and profit-sharing opportunities. My financial situation was excellent, student loans paid off, a growing investment portfolio, and enough savings to consider buying my own home. Yet my parents continued to hint at financial struggles and to praise Victoria for her ongoing support of the family. The disconnect became impossible to ignore when my mother mentioned casually during a phone call that Victoria had bought them new appliances for their kitchen. "She's such a generous daughter," my mother said warmly. "Even though she's working so hard to build her career, she still finds ways to take care of us. The new refrigerator and dishwasher are beautiful, much nicer than anything we could have afforded on our own." I did quick mental calculations. The appliances my mother described would have cost several $1,000s, money that should have been coming from my monthly transfers, not from Victoria's supposedly struggling acting career. Either my parents had more disposable income than they'd let on, or Victoria had access to funds that didn't align with her stated financial situation. That night, I lay awake in my Portland apartment, staring at the ceiling and trying to reconcile what I knew with what I was being told. The pieces didn't fit together, but I wasn't ready to confront the implications of what I was starting to suspect. The truth began to unravel 6 months before my mother's 60th birthday party, triggered by an unexpected encounter that would change everything. I was attending a business conference in Seattle when I ran into Marcus Chen, a college classmate who'd moved to Los Angeles after graduation to work in the entertainment industry as a talent agent's assistant. Over coffee during a conference break, Marcus casually mentioned seeing Victoria at various industry events around Los Angeles. "Your sister really knows how to work a room," he said with admiration. "She's always at the best parties, the exclusive networking events. She must be doing really well for herself. I see her at places where even successful actors have trouble getting invitations." Marcus's comment was innocent, but it planted a seed of doubt that grew stronger over the following weeks. I began paying closer attention to Victoria's social media posts, noting the frequency and expense of her activities. The math didn't add up. Even with my parents' support and occasional modeling jobs, she shouldn't have had access to the lifestyle she was displaying. I started researching the costs of living in Los Angeles, the average earnings of struggling actors and models, and the prices of the restaurants, events, and activities Victoria regularly featured on her social media. The discrepancies became undeniable. Either she was earning far more than she'd led the family to believe, or she had access to money from another source. The possibility that had been lurking in the back of my mind finally forced its way to the surface. Victoria might be using the money I sent for our parents to fund her own lifestyle. The betrayal would be enormous, not just financial but emotional and moral. It would mean that while I lived modestly and sent thousands of dollars each month to help our struggling parents, Victoria was using that money to maintain her Hollywood image while taking credit for supporting the family. I wanted to be wrong. I hoped desperately that there was another explanation, that my suspicions were the product of years of feeling overlooked and undervalued. But as the evidence mounted, denial became impossible. The breaking point came 3 months before my mother's birthday. During a routine family phone call, my mother mentioned that they were behind on their mortgage payments and worried about foreclosure. "We've been struggling more than usual," she admitted, her voice heavy with stress. "Your father's commissions are down again and I haven't sold a house in 2 months. Victoria helps when she can, but she's having her own challenges in LA." I hung up the phone in shock. If my parents were facing foreclosure despite the $2,500 I sent every month, where was that money going? Even accounting for their basic living expenses, my contributions should have been more than enough to keep them current on their mortgage payments. That night, I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to investigate what was happening to the money I'd been sending. I started by carefully reviewing my bank statements, documenting every transfer I'd made to Victoria's account over the past 2 years. The total was staggering, over $60,000 that I'd intended for our parents' support. I also began discreetly researching Victoria's lifestyle and expenses. Through social media and mutual acquaintances, I pieced together a picture of someone living well beyond what should have been her means. The expensive restaurants, designer clothes, luxury trips, and exclusive events all pointed to access to significant funds that didn't match her stated income as a struggling entertainer. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. My college roommate Jennifer worked for a private investigation firm in Portland and owed me a favor from when I'd helped her with a financial crisis during our senior year. I asked her to discreetly research Victoria's financial situation, providing her with publicly available information and social media posts. Jennifer's report was damning. Victoria had been using aliases and mail forwarding services to hide significant debt and spending patterns. She'd accumulated credit card balances, personal loans, and other obligations that far exceeded what she could reasonably afford on her stated income. Most tellingly, her spending patterns closely matched the timing and amounts of the transfers I'd been making to her account. "Whoever this person is," Jennifer told me, not knowing it was my sister, "they're living a lifestyle funded by debt and external sources of income. The pattern suggests they're receiving regular payments from someone else and using that money to maintain an unsustainable standard of living." I had my proof, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. Confronting Victoria directly would likely result in denial and excuses. Going to my parents would force them to choose between their 2 daughters, and I knew who they would choose. I decided to wait for the right moment, hoping that an opportunity would present itself for the truth to come out naturally. That opportunity came at my mother's 60th birthday party, during what should have been a celebration but became the moment when our family's carefully constructed fiction finally collapsed. The party was held at Benedetti's, my mother's favorite Italian restaurant in Salem, with the private dining room decorated in gold and burgundy, her preferred colors. The guest list included immediate family, close relatives, and several family friends who'd known us for years. I'd driven down from Portland for the occasion, bringing a carefully chosen gift, a beautiful jewelry box I'd had custom-made by a local artisan, engraved with a photo of my mother's parents and a heartfelt message about carrying family memories forward. Victoria arrived late, making an entrance that commanded the room's attention as always. She wore a designer dress that I recognized from recent social media posts, paired with jewelry that sparkled under the restaurant's warm lighting. She carried a large gift bag that she presented to my mother with theatrical flair. "This is just a little something to show how much I love you, Mom," Victoria announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. Inside the bag was an expensive handbag from a luxury brand, the kind of gift that cost more than many people's monthly salary. The room erupted in appreciation and compliments. Relatives gathered around to examine the handbag, commenting on its quality and obvious expense. "Victoria, this is too much," my mother said, but her delight was evident. "You shouldn't have spent so much money on me." "Nothing's too expensive for my mom," Victoria replied, beaming under the attention. "Besides, I've been blessed with success this year. My agent says big things are coming and I want to share my good fortune with the family." I sat at the table, watching this performance while calculating the cost of the gift Victoria had just presented. The handbag alone probably cost more than I'd spent on my custom jewelry box, despite the fact that I was the one with a steady, well-paying job while Victoria was supposedly struggling to establish her career. The conversation at dinner naturally turned to family updates and achievements. Victoria regaled the table with stories of her recent auditions, callback opportunities, and the important industry connections she was making in Los Angeles. She spoke confidently about upcoming projects and the lifestyle that success in entertainment afforded her. "It's not an easy business," she said with practiced humility, "but I'm starting to see the payoff for all my hard work and investment in my career. And of course, I'm always thinking about family. I try to help Mom and Dad whenever I can because family comes first." The relatives nodded approvingly, several of them commenting on what a good daughter Victoria was and how proud my parents must be of both her success and her generosity. I noticed that my own career and life in Portland were barely mentioned, relegated to brief, polite inquiries about my work that were quickly overshadowed by Victoria's more colorful stories. As the evening progressed, the conversation took the turn that I'd been dreading but also, in a strange way, anticipating. My Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister who'd always been particularly fond of Victoria, raised her wine glass in a toast. "I want to say something about these two beautiful daughters," she began, her voice slightly slurred from the wine. "Susan, you've raised two wonderful girls, but I have to say Victoria really stands out as someone special. Not everyone would be so successful and still remember to take care of their parents the way she does." Other relatives joined in with similar sentiments, praising Victoria for her success and her dedication to family. The comparisons were subtle but unmistakable. Victoria was the daughter who'd made something of herself and still remembered where she came from, while I was simply the responsible one who'd taken the safe path. My mother, flush with wine and attention, decided to make her own speech. She stood up, looking directly at me with eyes that held years of accumulated disappointment and favoritism. "I want to say something to both my daughters," she began, her voice clear despite the alcohol. "Victoria, you make me so proud every single day. You're talented, you're successful, and you never forget about your family. You take care of us even when you're building your own career, and that shows the kind of person you are." Then she turned to me and I saw the criticism coming before she spoke the words. "Kylie, you're smart and you have a good job, but you need to learn from your sister. Victoria understands that family comes first, that success means nothing if you don't share it with the people who love you. You'll never be half the woman your sister is because she has heart, she has generosity, and she knows how to take care of the people who matter." The room fell silent except for a few uncomfortable murmurs from relatives who sensed they were witnessing something more personal than a birthday toast. I felt the familiar sting of public humiliation, the same feeling I'd experienced countless times throughout my childhood and adolescence. But this time was different. This time I had information that changed everything. I stood up slowly, my hands trembling not with hurt but with years of suppressed anger and the weight of the truth I was about to reveal. You're absolutely right, Mom, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. Victoria does know how to take care of family. She's been taking excellent care of herself with the money I've been sending to you for the past 2 years. The room went completely silent. Wine glasses paused midway to lips, conversations stopped mid-sentence, and every eye in the room focused on me. If Victoria is such a generous daughter and I'm such a disappointment, I continued, pulling out my phone with deliberate movements, then from now on let her handle all the family expenses. I'm done sending money. My parents stared at me in confusion and growing alarm. What money? My father asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kylie, what are you talking about? We've never received any money from you. Victoria is the one who's been helping us. I opened my banking app and scrolled to the transaction history, the evidence I'd been carrying with me for months, waiting for exactly this moment. I've been sending $2,500 every month to Victoria's account to give to you, I said, holding up the phone so everyone at the nearby tables could see the screen. Sometimes more when you mention special expenses. Over the past 2 years, I've sent more than $60,000 that was supposed to help with your mortgage, utilities, medical bills, and daily expenses. I turned to face Victoria, who had gone pale and was staring at me with a mixture of shock and panic. So either Mom and Dad are lying about their financial struggles, or someone has been keeping that money for themselves. The elegant private dining room at Benedetti's, with its warm lighting and gold decorations, suddenly felt like a courtroom where a verdict was about to be delivered. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity but was probably only seconds, as 30 people processed what they had just heard. My mother was the first to break the silence, her voice shaking as she looked from me to Victoria and back again. Kylie, are you telling us that you've been sending money to Victoria to give to us? I nodded, scrolling through more transactions on my phone. Every month for 2 years. Here's February, $2,500 with the note for Mom and Dad utilities and groceries. Here's March, $2,700 because you mentioned Dad's medical bills were higher that month. Here's April, May, June. I could have continued for several more minutes, showing the unbroken chain of transfers. My father, his face a mask of confusion and growing anger, turned to Victoria. Victoria, is this true? Have you been receiving money from your sister that was meant for us? Victoria sat frozen in her chair, her designer dress and expensive jewelry suddenly looking like costume pieces in a play that had gone horribly wrong. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. The mortgage payments, my mother whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. We've been behind on the mortgage, struggling to make ends meet, and you. She looked at Victoria with dawning horror. You told us you were helping when you could, giving us a few hundred here and there from your modeling work. And all those expensive gifts, my father added, his voice gaining strength and anger. The new appliances, the jewelry you bought your mother for Christmas, the dinners at expensive restaurants when you came home to visit. We thought you were finally succeeding, that your career was taking off. Aunt Margaret, who had been so effusive in her praise of Victoria just minutes earlier, leaned forward in her chair. Victoria, please tell us this isn't true. Please explain what's happening here. But Victoria remained silent, her face flushed with shame and her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her silence was more damning than any confession could have been. I continued scrolling through my banking records, adding details that made the betrayal even more apparent. Here's the transfer I made just last month, $3,000 because Mom mentioned they were worried about foreclosure. And here's the one from 3 months ago when Dad's car needed major repairs. Every single transfer has a note explaining what the money was for. I looked directly at Victoria, and when I spoke, my voice carried years of accumulated pain and disappointment. While I've been living in a studio apartment in Portland, working 60-hour weeks, and sending half my salary to help our supposedly struggling parents, you've been using that money to fund your Hollywood lifestyle. The expensive restaurants, the designer clothes, the luxury trips I see all over your social media, it's all been paid for with money I sent to help Mom and Dad keep their house. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and whispered conversations as relatives tried to process what they were witnessing. I heard fragments of comments. "I can't believe she would do that to her own family. Those poor parents. How could someone be so selfish?" My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the restaurant's hardwood floor. She walked around the table to where Victoria sat, and for a moment I thought she was going to comfort her older daughter, to find some way to excuse or explain away what had just been revealed. Instead, my mother looked down at Victoria with an expression I'd never seen before, disappointment so profound it seemed to age her years in that moment. "How could you do this to us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying clearly in the silent room. "How could you let us worry about losing our house while you spent your sister's money on designer handbags and expensive dinners?" Victoria finally found her voice, but it came out as a broken sob. "Mom, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was going to pay it back. My career was supposed to take off and I was going to make everything right." "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" my father repeated, his voice rising with each word. "Victoria, we've been eating generic brand food and shopping at thrift stores while you've been living like a millionaire with your sister's money. We almost lost the house 3 months ago." The full scope of the betrayal was becoming clear to everyone in the room. Victoria hadn't just stolen money. She had allowed our parents to suffer financially while she maintained an expensive lifestyle. Worse, she had accepted praise and credit for being a generous daughter while I was dismissed as selfish and uncaring. "The worst part," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion, "is that I never wanted credit or recognition. I just wanted our parents to be comfortable and secure. I didn't even call to check if you were receiving the money because I trusted you completely." I looked around the room at the faces of relatives and family friends who had spent years praising Victoria and dismissing me. I worked extra hours, took on additional consulting projects, and lived on a budget that would have embarrassed a college student because I thought I was helping our parents. Meanwhile, Victoria was posting Instagram photos from 5-star restaurants and designer shopping trips, funded by money that was supposed to keep Mom and Dad from losing their home. Victoria finally looked up, tears streaming down her face, her carefully applied makeup now smeared and ruined. "Kylie, please let me explain. It started small. I just borrowed a little bit here and there when I had auditions and needed to look the part. I always planned to pay it back once I booked a big job." "A little bit here and there?" I pulled up my calculator app and did quick math. "Victoria, you've stolen over $60,000 from our parents. That's not borrowing lunch money, that's systematic theft from your own family." The number landed in the room like a physical blow. Several relatives gasped audibly, and I saw my father put his hand over his heart as if he was having trouble breathing. $60,000, my mother repeated numbly. "Victoria, we could have paid off the second mortgage with that money. We could have fixed the roof, replaced the furnace, gotten Dad's medical issues properly treated." The practical implications of Victoria's betrayal were staggering. Our parents had been living in financial stress and making significant sacrifices while Victoria used their support money to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Every worried phone call about bills, every mention of needed repairs they couldn't afford, every stress-related health issue our parents had suffered, all of it could have been avoided if Victoria had simply been honest. Uncle Frank, who had been quietly observing the confrontation, finally spoke up. "Victoria, I think you need to explain exactly how you justified this to yourself. Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like you stole $60,000 from your own parents while they struggled to keep their home." Victoria's explanation, when it came, was a mixture of self-justification and genuine remorse. "I got behind on my credit cards when I first moved to LA," she began, her voice shaking. "The cost of living is so much higher than I expected, and the modeling and acting work was more sporadic than I'd hoped." She wiped her eyes with a napkin, smearing her makeup further. "When Kylie started sending money for you guys, I thought I could just use a little bit to catch up on my bills. I told myself I was borrowing it, that I'd pay it back as soon as I got established." "But instead of getting established, you got more expensive," I observed. "Every month, your lifestyle became more lavish while our parents' situation got worse." Victoria nodded miserably. I know how it looks and I know how wrong it was. But once I started, it became harder and harder to stop. I was networking with successful people, going to industry events, trying to build the connections I needed. I convinced myself that maintaining the right image was an investment in my future success. An investment with our parents' money, I said flatly. Money they desperately needed while you were eating at restaurants that charge more for one meal than they spend on groceries in a week. The confrontation continued for another hour, with relatives asking increasingly pointed questions and Victoria's explanations becoming more desperate and less convincing. She admitted to spending the money on everything from designer clothes for auditions to expensive dinners with industry contacts who never materialized into actual job opportunities. The most damaging revelation came when she confessed that some of the money had gone to pay off gambling debts she'd accumulated at Los Angeles casinos, a detail that shocked everyone and revealed just how far she'd fallen from the golden daughter image she'd cultivated. My father, who had remained relatively quiet throughout most of the confrontation, finally stood up and walked over to Victoria. For a moment I thought he might comfort her, but instead he spoke in a voice I'd never heard from him before, cold, disappointed, and final. "Victoria, you need to leave," he said simply. "We need time to process this, and I can't look at you right now without feeling sick." Victoria's tears turned to sobs as the full weight of her actions hit her. She gathered her purse with shaking hands and left the restaurant without another word, leaving behind the expensive handbag she'd given our mother, a gift that everyone now knew had been purchased with stolen money. The aftermath of that evening changed our family dynamics forever. In the weeks that followed, I worked with my parents to establish a new system for financial support. I opened a joint account with them, taught my mother how to use online banking despite her initial resistance, and set up automatic transfers that they could monitor in real time. More importantly, the conversation patterns in our family began to shift. For the first time in my life, my parents asked genuine questions about my work, my goals, and my life in Portland. They stopped comparing me to Victoria and started seeing me as the daughter who had quietly carried them through their most difficult financial period. "I don't know how we can ever make this right with you," my mother said during one of our weekly phone calls. "We were so blind to what you were doing for us and so taken in by Victoria's lies." "You don't need to make anything right," I replied honestly. "I didn't help you because I wanted recognition. I helped because you're my parents and I love you." Victoria's story took a different turn. Cut off from the family money she'd been stealing and forced to face the reality of her situation in Los Angeles, she had to make some hard choices. She moved back to Salem temporarily, found a job as a receptionist at a dental office, and began the long process of paying back the money she'd taken. It would take her nearly 5 years to repay the full amount, and our relationship remained strained throughout that period. Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't rebuild easily. But slowly, gradually, Victoria began to change. The humility forced on her by her circumstances, combined with the reality of working a regular job and living within her means, helped her develop a more realistic perspective on life and success. During this period, my own life continued to flourish. I met David Richardson, a fellow consultant who shared my passion for helping businesses succeed. Our relationship developed naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values rather than drama and excitement. David had also experienced family favoritism, as the younger son overshadowed by an older brother who was a successful surgeon, and he understood the dynamics that had shaped my early life. We married 2 years after my mother's birthday party, in a small ceremony in Portland that focused on the people who truly supported us rather than family obligation. My parents attended, and for the first time in my life, they seemed genuinely proud of my choices and happy for my success. Victoria also attended the wedding, having worked hard to rebuild her relationship with the family. She gave a speech that was honest about her past mistakes and genuine in her support for my happiness. "Kylie deserves all the good things happening to her," she said, her voice steady and sincere. "She's been taking care of all of us for years, and it's time we recognized what an amazing person she is." The speech was a small but significant step in rebuilding our relationship. While we would never have the easy closeness that some siblings enjoy, we developed a mutual respect based on honesty rather than the lies and favoritism that had poisoned our earlier relationship. 5 years after that fateful birthday party, I received a call from Victoria that marked another turning point in our family's story. She had been offered a position as an office manager at a growing marketing firm in Salem. Not the Hollywood glamour she'd once dreamed of, but a stable, well-paying job that utilized her people skills and natural charisma in a productive way. "I wanted you to be the first to know," she said, and I could hear genuine happiness in her voice. "It's not the life I thought I wanted, but it's a life I can be proud of. And Kylie, I made the final payment on what I owed you and Mom and Dad. I'm officially debt-free." That phone call represented more than just financial resolution. It marked the end of a painful chapter in our family's story and the beginning of something healthier and more honest. Today, at 35, I live in a beautiful home in Portland's Hawthorne district with David and our 2 young children. My consulting business has grown into a successful firm with 12 employees, and I've written a book about small business financial management that became a bestseller in its category. My parents, now in their late 60s, live comfortably in their paid-off home in Salem. The financial stress that dominated their lives for so many years has been replaced by security and peace of mind. They call regularly, not to ask for money or complain about their struggles, but to share stories about their grandchildren and express pride in both their daughters' achievements. Victoria married a kind man named Robert who owns a small construction company in Salem. They have 1 daughter, and Victoria has become a devoted mother who is determined to treat her child with the unconditional love and acceptance that was sometimes missing in our own upbringing. She still helps our parents, but now in appropriate ways, bringing dinner when one of them is sick, helping with yard work, or simply spending time with them. The relationship between Victoria and me will never be simple or easy, but it has evolved into something sustainable and real. We've learned to appreciate each other's strengths without the toxic comparisons that marked our childhood. She acknowledges the harm her actions caused, and I've learned to forgive while maintaining healthy boundaries. Most importantly, we've both learned valuable lessons about family, responsibility, and the difference between love and favoritism. Love doesn't require one person to diminish so another can shine. Real family support means lifting each other up, not tearing each other down through comparison and competition. The story of that birthday party confrontation has become something of a family legend, told with a mixture of pain and humor at holiday gatherings. It serves as a reminder of how far we've all come and how much stronger our relationships became when they were built on honesty rather than illusion. Looking back, I realize that being overlooked and undervalued, while painful, also gave me something valuable: the independence and strength to build a life based on my own values and achievements. I never needed to live up to anyone else's expectations because I learned early that the only person's approval I truly needed was my own. The shadow I lived in for so many years wasn't just Victoria's, it was also the shadow of family dynamics that prioritized style over substance, charm over character, and appearance over authenticity. Stepping out of that shadow wasn't just about confronting Victoria's theft or demanding recognition from my parents. It was about recognizing my own worth independent of their approval or acknowledgement. The confrontation at my mother's 60th birthday party was dramatic and painful, but it was also necessary. Sometimes the truth has to be spoken boldly and publicly to break through years of accumulated lies and misperceptions. Sometimes families need to be shaken to their foundations before they can rebuild on more solid ground. Today, when I look at family photos from recent gatherings, I see something that wasn't there before: genuine happiness and connection. There are no more golden children or shadows, no more favorites or forgotten ones. There are just people who love each other imperfectly but honestly, who have learned from their mistakes, and who have built something stronger from the broken pieces of what came before. The girl who once sat silent at family dinners, dismissed and compared unfavorably to her sister, grew up to become a woman who knows her worth and insists on being treated accordingly. That transformation didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't without cost, but it was ultimately the most valuable thing I ever accomplished. Sometimes the greatest gift a family can give is the motivation to prove them wrong about who you are and what you're capable of becoming. In trying to diminish me through comparison, my family inadvertently gave me the determination to become someone who couldn't be diminished by anyone's opinion or expectations. That realization, more than any apology or acknowledgement, was what finally freed me from the shadow I'd lived in for so long. I didn't need their validation because I had learned to validate myself. I didn't need their approval because I had learned to approve of my own choices and achievements. The story of my family is ultimately a story of redemption and growth, not just mine but all of ours. It's proof that even the most dysfunctional dynamics can change when people are willing to confront uncomfortable truths and do the hard work of rebuilding relationships on more honest foundations. The confrontation that began with my mother's cruel comparison and my defiant response ended with all of us becoming better versions of ourselves. Sometimes that's what families do for each other, not through endless support and encouragement, but through creating circumstances that force growth, accountability, and change. In the end, I learned that the love worth having is the love that sees and values who you really are, not who others think you should be. That lesson, born from years of feeling invisible and undervalued, became the foundation for everything good that followed in my life. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand up and say, if that's how you really feel, then let someone else handle it. Sometimes walking away from a situation where you're undervalued is the first step toward finding one where you're appreciated for exactly who you are.